say?
I am Iron Man.
Oh, what's in the box?
Flash, I love you, but we only have 14 hours to save the Earth.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
And here we go.
Hi, my name is Chris, and this is Random Rambling Reviews, formerly spoiler-free movie reviews. But I'm wanting to change things up with regards to the delivery and format for 2018, so hopefully you'll all join me next year as I continue to review and analyse films. So, anyway, 2017, much like the last few years, has been a bit of a mixed bag in quality when looking at many of the films that have been released. For every impressive return to form sequel, there has been a seriously why the f*** did they bother sequel. And for the few exciting original movies, there have been an equal amount of original misfires. Then a whole bunch of reboots, remakes, brain-dead Fast and Furious films, relentless cash grabs, dead-on-arrival cinematic universe starters, and, well, so on and so forth. But hey, at least we still got 3 new Marvel Cinematic Universe films, another Star Wars movie, and a kick-ass Wolverine movie that should have come out at least 17 years ago. So, I'm going to break down my top 10 favourite films of 2017. And of course, this is just my own personal list based on what I have managed to see this year. Yours might be different, and that's great, but this is just the top 10 films that surprised and excited me this year at the cinema. Okay, now, before we go any further, I just want to state straight off the bat that Star Wars The Last Jedi is not part of this list. Not because I haven't seen it, and not because I'm one of those enraged nerds right now who believes that Rian Johnson has just force-choked their childhood. I thought it was fine. It had a few issues, but there was a lot of things that I enjoyed about it, but there were quite a few issues. The main reason for it not being on my list is that I'm just not that big a Star Wars fan. I enjoyed them, and I enjoyed The Last Jedi, but it's just another set of films to me, so I feel like it would be really disingenuous for me to have it on my list. If that's going to make you want to stop watching the video because Star Wars isn't on the list, then that's fine. You're probably not my target audience anyway. So, enough with the random ramblings. See what I did there? Let's get started with our list.
Action!
What line? What line?
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Okay.
At number 10, this was very much a last-minute addition, but it quickly became a big part of my top 10. Based on the book that was based on the making of the best worst movie ever made, it's almost poetic that the Citizen Kane of bad movies would have such a great movie made about it that could be a serious Oscar contender.
This is my movie, and this is my life.
The Disaster Artist is essentially a love letter to the room. It works with the themes of friendship, being your own hero, and creating your own destiny regardless of whether you're actually capable of it or not. James Franco just embodies and inhabits the enigma that is Tommy Wiseau. His impression is just mildly disturbing with how good it is, and it is worth the cost of admission just to see his performance. They recreate direct scenes from The Room, and they pretty much have every working comedian from TV and film in this movie, and the film tackles a lot of well-known moments that have been built into the mythology of this craptastic masterpiece. The film shows the humorous side of Tommy and acknowledges and plays out some of his darker habits. His darker traits are mostly accepted in the film and are not properly challenged as they probably should have been, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with a very damaged man. And as the credits rolled, we still didn't learn some of the basics about Tommy Wiseau, such as where he's from, how old he is, or where he actually got the money to make a nearly $6 million production. As I said at the start, the film is more of a love letter to The Room than anything else, and is definitely worth your time and money. Now, normally when you wait too long to make a sequel, you either get complete shit like Dumb and Dumber 2 or bland garbage like Jurassic World. It's very rare to get a solid sequel to long-delayed films, with Mad Max Fury Road being probably one of the better exceptions. But this year, we got 2. And the first on my list is Denis Villeneuve's sequel to the 1982 film Blade Runner.
There is an order to things. That's what we do here. We keep order.
Lovingly crafted, beautifully executed, this film stands shoulder to shoulder with its predecessor and feels like it belongs in the world Ridley Scott created over 30 years ago. Yes, it might be a little too long. Yes, it might disappear up its own arse every now and then. But it's a bit of a catch-22 scenario. If you're a fan of Blade Runner, then you kind of want to spend as much time as possible in this world. And it wouldn't really be a Blade Runner film if it didn't get all introspective and philosophical about the human condition.
I always told you, you're special. Your story isn't over yet. There's still a page left.
Villeneuve, much like he has done in his other films, blends real-world locations with CGI in a way that looks real throughout the entire film. I can't even think of a single scene that stuck out as painfully CGI. Ultimately though, if nothing else, if you really need only one reason to see this film, then it needs to be for Roger Deakins' jaw-dropping, eye-watering, beautiful cinematography. Every shot in this film just makes you wonder again and again, why the fuck has Roger Deakins never won an Oscar for Best Cinematography? If he doesn't win in 2018, I think Deakins is going to have to go full DiCaprio and eat raw moose liver in his next film. The second long-delayed sequel to make it into my list does not disappoint. When you take a much-loved film such as the original Trainspotting, it's easy to assume that it's not going to work. However, T2 Trainspotting, much like Blade Runner 2049, bucks that expectation.
Hello, Mark. So what you been up to for 20 years?
Set 20 years after the original, we see Renton return to Edinburgh to reconcile with old friends and hopefully stayed well the away from Begbie. And naturally, everything doesn't go as planned. The film is probably best represented by the soundtrack. A mixture of original songs and new and exciting songs, Danny Boyle directs like a young man once again. Not that he hasn't been doing that in every film since Trainspotting. Boyle manages to blend a lot of the original film beats and footage with fresh original ideas that feels like the most natural progression for these beloved characters. The sequel thankfully goes in its own direction from Irvin Welsh's original sequel, Porno, which honestly was a little underwhelming if you ever read it. It's funny, it's heartbreaking, and it manages to take the most unlikable characters and even makes you empathize with them. If you're a fan of the original, you really need to see this sequel because it is everything that you want to see from these characters and the drug-riddled world that they live in. Now, let's face it, the easiest thing the filmmakers could have done with one of the great sleeper hits of 2015 is essentially create a beat-for-beat sequel to John Wick the same way filmmakers did with Taken 2, The Hangover 2 and Die Hard 2. But instead, they built on the world that we got in the last film.
Accounts payable, how may I help you?
I'd like to open an account.
Name on the account?
John Wick.
Much like the original, the film is incredibly creative with all its kills. Influenced from the Korean action movies, we have unflinching death battles that involve Glock 17s, Glock 26s, AR-15s, Bellini M4s, fists, vehicles, pencils, knives, and ropes, just to name a few. The film once again shows us operatic ballets of violence and avoids all the unnecessary edits, and is already started to be mimicked in other films such as Atomic Blonde and last year's Captain America Civil War. And just quickly, I know the filmmakers of John Wick assisted in these two movies, so you don't need to write that in the comments section. Keanu Reeves is still a beast in this film, as he essentially doubles down on all the kills from the first film and sets up a third installment that already has me salivating for more. If you love your action movies, this needs to be not only a must-see on your list, but a new standard that you should expect from your action films.
I'll kill them all.
Of course you will.
I'll try and do the same.
Holy shit, we actually finally got a good DC Cinematic Universe film. Now yes, I know that DC fanboys will kick and scream at that idea because in their eyes, all DC films are perfect and better than Marvel and yada yada yada, but I mean, come on. The previous films in the DCEU have had some good moments or scenes, but the overall products cannot be called perfect by any stretch of the actual definition. But then comes Wonder Woman, a movie that took its time in building the audience's understanding of the characters, wasn't trying to speed ram a bunch of different comic book movies into one film in the lead up to Justice League, and most importantly, earned each moment it delivered. The No Man's Land sequence is one of the best scenes of the year, and probably one of the best scenes in any comic book movie. Plus, Steve Trevor's death does not feel forced or unearned. The film's third act does become another noisy CGI clusterfuck fest like a lot of blockbusters tend to do nowadays. That's probably the only thing that keeps the film from being ranked higher in my top 10. However, when all is said and done, Wonder Woman is the film that DC and Warner Brothers really needed, and hopefully... Oh shit, I forgot. Justice League already came out this year too, didn't it? And undid all that good work that Wonder Woman put forward. F*** it.
Daughter of Hippolyta, in the name of all that is good, your wrath upon this world is over.
Now look, I'm not a war movie buff, but when Christopher Nolan is making a war movie, you damn well know I'm going to watch it and it's going to be good. What makes this film really stand apart from other war movies is the choices that Nolan has made, from discontinuous editing to 3 different timelines to the scale of the battles on screen. However, the most impressive element of all is that the film could almost function as a silent film, because there's so little dialogue, yet so much is said through characters' actions. With Hans Zimmer's nerve-wracking ticking score making you bite your fingernails down to your frigging knuckles, this film has no time to do the traditional talking around the campfire discussing the girl who's waiting at home, or telling the backstories that humanize the soldiers. It's all about the mission and the survival, which is both realistic and refreshing for a war movie. One of the rare original films for the year, Dunkirk proves that once again a film can be sold on Nolan's name alone, and could be Nolan's best chance to date for that elusive Oscar. However, if he doesn't get it, well, he might need to go full DiCaprio and eat raw fish guts in his next film.
You can practically see it from here.
What?
Home.
Now, this film has had one of the most interesting criticisms thrown at it. A lot of people have complained that this film is just too funny. What the f*** does that really mean? I find the film too fun and too enjoyable. It's just such an odd criticism. Anyway, Thor Ragnarok injects some life into not only the character of Thor, but the Marvel Universe as a whole. The previous Thor films have been perfectly fine, but honestly, they've always been the weakest link in the previous phases. Taika Waititi has impressively broken that trend. Sorry, Doctor Strange, I think you might end up being Phase 3's weakest link. If you're a bit of a novice to the Marvel Universe and you haven't seen Ragnarok yet, and you're unsure of what films to watch to prepare yourself for the fun adventure, can I just go against every other comic book nerd's recommendation of Thor films, Hulk films, and Avengers films in whatever the order they decide, and just recommend watching Taika Waititi's Boy and Hunt for the Wilder People, so that you just get a full appreciation for the skill of balancing humor and heart in the same scenes, along with his knack for good storytelling with even better characters. Filled with fun, humor, much needed Chris Hemsworth charm, and influences from cult classics such as Flash Gordon and Big Trouble in Little China, this film really opens up a whole bunch of new possibilities for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, along with some heartfelt moments, some genuine surprises, and some big chances. Taika Waititi has created a renewed desire to see a Thor 4.
What were you the god of again?
One of the few truly original films of the year, and one that deserves even more praise and a wider audience than it's already received, Baby Driver is just this amazing blend of musical, heist, car chase, drama, rom-com, and it probably shouldn't work, but Edgar Wright directing just makes it work. With an opening 5 minutes that outdoes all 8 Fast and Furious movies, Edgar Wright firmly establishes himself as an action director and an expert editor. Although, to be totally fair, editing has probably been his signature since Spaced. Using the soundtrack to drive the story and be an integral part of the main character, the rewatch value of this film will give you a new experience every time as you notice a new foreshadowing moment, or a new thing in the background that links to the soundtrack, or just another cut that you didn't realise the first time you watched it. With a great cast, driving soundtrack, and that feeling that Edgar Wright might just only be warming up at this stage, a new film from Wright is just as exciting as a new film from Nolan.
Baby, you tell me who does.
Is she a good girl? You love her? Yes, I do. That's too bad.
Now this was really hard not to make my number 1 pick. I'm not gonna lie, I really struggled with my top 2, and even while doing this now, I still struggle between it being number 1 and number 2. But Logan is really something else. After 17 years, this is the best send-off you could have asked for not only Hugh Jackman, but the character of Logan, who has just embodied this role ever since the first X-Men film all the way back in 2000. Finally, giving us a Wolverine we've always wanted to see, James Mangold and Hugh Jackman really went all out with this film, giving us some real surprises, defying conventions, creating some real stakes, and doing the near impossible, making a child actor interesting and not a hindrance to the film. Pulling from westerns of old such as Shane and Unforgiven, having horror elements reminiscent of the original Terminator, themes from films like Children of Men, and the Clint Eastwood-styled send-off of Gran Torino, this film is up there with The Dark Knight as a comic book masterpiece that transcends not only the X-Men movies, but comic book movies as a whole. With some huge gut-punch moments, Logan will do the one thing that no other comic book movie has ever been able to do: move you to tears.
You should take a moment. Feel it. You still have time.
As I said, it was so hard to choose between this and Logan, and at the end of the day, I'm still conflicted. But ultimately, Get Out blew us away for several reasons. It came out of nowhere, so there were no expectations. It was an original movie, and it was a horror that had something to say, and it gets people talking. Now, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil anything. Ideally, if you go in as cold as possible, I think you will get the most out of this film. All you need to know is that it's a story about a young African American man meeting his white girlfriend's parents for the first time at their secluded home, and something just doesn't feel quite right. One of the most impressive aspects to this film is that this is director Jordan Peele's first horror feature film, and he delivers it like a seasoned professional. He drip feeds and teases important information to the audience throughout this entire runtime, but at the same time doesn't give you enough to go on so that you're constantly on the edge of your seat. He does this so well that even when you're in the final moments of the film, you still believe that anything can happen. And if that isn't good filmmaking, then I don't know what is. With some big scares, some uncomfortable moments, dark humor, and moments that will have you questioning whether you've ever delivered backhanded racism, it really is a film that has something to say, that is relevant to today's climate, and will stimulate conversation when the credits roll.
There's too many white people. I get nervous.
No. No. No, 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 no.
A bomb is a terrible thing to waste.
So look, that's my top 10 list. Do you agree? Disagree? Was your list similar, or was it very different? Are you still hung up on the fact that I didn't include Star Wars, or that I said that DC films are less than perfect? Then let us know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your lists, and I'm happy to have a civil debate. If you want to see any of my reviews for these films, I've included them in the description below. Although, full disclosure, I didn't have the chance to review all of these movies on account for the fact that I had a newborn about the time that Blade Runner came out. And of course, why not hit the subscribe button? What harm could it really do? This is Chris Gooch for Random Rambling Reviews, signing off.